Hey, what's going on, guys? This is Mage. I have a very special guest with me today. He is probably the best random player in the game right now, and he's also going to be filling in for our elf player in the Creeping Patterns video. It is Sexy, so why don't you go ahead and say hi, Sexy?
All right, what's up, man? Thanks for having me, Mage.
Oh, absolutely. So, why don't you give us a little bit of background about this game, if you remember? I believe that this looked like it was a bot game.
Yeah, it was a bot game. I haven't watched the whole replay in its entirety, but it was a good close game. But it was just a good example of kind of my early game and just the build orders and how I scout and this and that on us when there's 6 players in this game.
Yeah, absolutely. And the first thing that really stood out to me was you're going for a quick altar of elders, which I'm guessing means that you're going for a demon hunter. First of all, is that correct?
Yeah, Demon Hunter here. Sometimes you can play a Warden or something like that, but I pretty much will always go Demon Hunter first if I do get the altar first and not a Tavern Hero.
And so, what made you decide to go for the early altar as opposed to a tavern hero? I know that Dark Ranger is certainly one of the most popular choices for Night Elf currently. So, what made you choose Demon Hunter here?
Well, it kind of depends on preference, really. I like playing Dark Ranger or Alchemist or Panda or any of the Tavern heroes as well. But I'm a big fan of Demon Hunter. It kind of suits my playstyle where I can be aggressive and try to use my advantage in micro that I have at times. Demon Hunter also plays creeps the map really well and helps you transition into tier 2 without being very vulnerable. He's also just good in these kind of games, like this kind of bot game where it has a lot of different players and anything can happen. He's strong from start to finish.
That's a good point. And you touched upon the bot game, and there being 6 players in this, so everything is full. In a 4-player game, would you change your hero choice, or do you think Demon Hunter is pretty solid in pretty much every game type?
It just really depends on which races I'm facing and which players I'm facing. But I like the Demon Hunter. I typically play Demon Hunter more than anything else. Where in the past I played the Dark Ranger more than anything else. But yeah, I think Demon Hunter's pretty solid here.
Okay, and then let's talk about the Ancient of War. I can see it's going down to the Goblin Merchant. It's one of the easiest orange camps that you're going to find, so you easily are able to take it out with the Demon Hunter and a single archer. But we see often players will go for Ancient of War creeping their expansion as opposed to the Goblin of Merchant. What's your reasoning for choosing this creep camp to Ancient of War creep?
Yeah, I like this one for a couple of reasons. First of all, the creeps are easy. They're melee creeps, so the Ancient of War will be able to take it easily without really additional wisps to help defend it. Also, just the way that this happens, I'll be able to get level 2 pretty easily here, and then I'll be able to wrap around right to my natural expansion and creep that easily. Now, if my natural expansion was tougher, then I would use the Ancient to creep it, but since I'm going to be able to creep it with just a Demon Hunter and a couple archers, being that it's relatively easy, then I'd rather save the Ancient of War for this creep. The second point is that later in the game, I can move this Ancient of War to this next orange camp that has the High Priest, and that's a more difficult camp, and the Ancient of War can help creep that as well.
Yep, absolutely. So we do see that you've already started your tech to Tree of Ages. It's pretty popular among free-for-all players to go for the expansion first before your tech. That way you can bank up a little bit early on. Is your rationale for teching here first the fact that it's a 6-player and you want to make sure that you get a solid army in case you get hit early on? You want to grab a second hero quicker or something else?
It's actually just the power of Elf. Elf is the one race that can really tech and expand and do everything you need to right at the same time. As you kind of see now, it's just hit the 4-minute mark, and I have the expansion running already, halfway to tier 2. As opposed to, like, for example, human or orc, you're gonna need more lumber to expand, so you're gonna have to prepare more lumber workers. With elf, I can just make my allotted wisps, creep, expand, you can kind of do everything at the same time.
Makes perfect sense, and as an elf player, I certainly have appreciated that many times in the past. So let's take a quick look at your base. We can see that you've got 3 Moonwells here that allows you to get up to 40 food, and you're just putting up your Hunter's Hall as we speak. That'll be timed perfectly when Tier 2 finishes. What in particular would you give as advice for elf players in terms of base construction and stuff like that?
Well, in general, early on, it's important. Before tier 2, obviously you want to have your Hunter's Hall, so you can make an Ancient Allure if need be. But also, I try to build my wells early on. Your wells are an early investment, where obviously they'll continue to gain moon juice throughout the game. So it's better to have them early so they can get them throughout the night. But yeah, the other thing you want to be able to build your shop also. I'm not sure if I did it this game. Yeah, here we go. And your shop before tier 2. So as long as you have your Hunter's Hall, your shop, an expansion, and then you're able to get your second hero, that's kind of the checklist that you want to go through as an elf player before you hit tier 2.
Okay, and we also noticed there that you perfectly timed getting that Goblin Shredder out. I presume that you have the exact timings memorized for when the Goblin Shredder comes out, and as a Night Elf player, how important is it to get that Shredder?
Yeah, the Shredder is first available, and the fourth, I'm not sure the exact time, but the fourth dot in the first night. So as you can see, I kind of used my archer to pull the creep and grab the Goblin Shredder. Here, sorry, I lost focus there for a second.
Nope, no problem.
As elf, it's not quite as important to grab the Shredder because your wisps can kind of guide you through there, but as any race really, the Shredder gives such a huge advantage. It allows you to power tech and continue to tier 3. And then it allows you to use the Lumber Wisp that you did have to make Ancients and just continue to kind of streamline the game without having to slow down and worry about the wood.
Yep, and speaking of Wisps, actually, we can see that you really haven't done a whole lot of scouting yet. What's your general motto for scouting as an elf, and how do you handle when to send out your scouts?
Well, it's a little bit different in the bot games. On ladder, when you're playing with unknown players, I don't send an early scout. Reason being is a lot of times it can be seen as an early sign of aggression. For example, say I scouted both ways. I might have one of those players come harass me, or the next one kind of come with some goofy rush. The main priority is really just establishing your core economy and getting up your first expansion, going through your tech, continuing your research, grabbing your shredder, trying to level up your heroes, kind of getting ready for the game. With that being said, when there's a little bit better players on the map, I like to scout. I usually send my first wisp at nighttime. For one, I mean, obviously it's easier to scout so you don't get killed by creeps, but that's not really the true reason. I don't need the immediate information, especially since I'm going to go Demon Hunter first. I'm going to be able to handle any kind of goofy rush that comes at me right off the bat. But as Elf, I mean, typically you either want to play rather passive and try to grab expansions and kind of play reactive and counter players, or you can play more aggressively, and that's how I usually do. And so I want to scout my first neighbors that I'm going to engage and just kind of see things like what kind of army they're making, what their hero combination is, and I want to kind of ready myself to see if I'm going to, make a lot of chims early, or if I want to, prepare, for example, against a good undead player. I'm going to, focus more on Ancient of the Winds so I can have my Hippogriff army ready to counter their air. So it kind of just depends, but yeah, the first night is probably a good time to send your wisp out.
Okay, and you're actually one of the few players that we see consistently go for an Ancient of Lore army. When do you make that decision as to whether or not you're going to be going for lores or winds, and what factors into that decision? And then finally, does the map Silverpine favor one over the other?
Yeah, that's a good question. It really depends on the races that you play again. I think you can filter in ancient lore units like a bear or maybe a mountain giant into any army really, but in general, you see FFA players really just go chims and hippos primarily, and I mean it's for good reason. It's really a strong combination, and each unit hard counters, one hard counters air and one hard counters ground, obviously. So there's nothing wrong with that, but ancient of lores allow you to be more versatile. I can start the game out. I didn't do it in this game, as I'm looking at my panda be stuck in my base. But if, like, for example, if I was to make early ancient lores in this game, I would be able to grab these middle creeps easier, and definitely kind of the early to mid game I'm much stronger. However, in a game where I'm gonna kind of prepare a later attack, I'm gonna build my Chimrus and my Ancient of Winds and kind of do it a little bit slower that way. So most games I wouldn't start with Ancient Lore, but sometimes I would, just depending on if I have a skilled opponent, then I'm gonna have to engage early on or not.
That's fair.
Another example of that is if I'm playing another elf, since all free-for-all elves play Chims and Hippos, you can just build 2 Ancient of Wars at tier 2, grab another expansion, and just build a bunch of Dryads, and elf will have no answer for those Dryads. especially until you're high level. If you're a high level elf player, obviously your heroes can handle the dryads since they're relatively weak. But if you're gonna, attack an elf and you just have chimps and hippos and they TP and you have 12 dryads, there's no real way to counter that. So that's another time that I may choose to go lore units against a lot of elf players.
Okay, and we just saw that the Staff of Silence went off there and allowed you to get a beautiful hero kill. How important is Staff of Silence on Silverpine Forest?
Man, Staff of Silence is my favorite item in the game. It's really a good item. In general, at Silverpine, I love this map. These markets are so important, and there's just so many good items. Staff of Silence for one, Amulet of Spell Shield. You can get the Khadgar's gems and the mana pendants that give you 300 health or 250 mana. I mean, there's other really good ones too. But yeah, the Staff of Silence is awesome. I specifically like it on this Demon Hunter because it almost gives me like a mini Dark Ranger effect. I can mana burn and Staff of Silence. So with good micro, I can really disable and shut down heroes. And as you know, in free for all, the most important thing to worry about are your heroes and other players' heroes, and that's why the Dark Ranger is so effective with Silence, and that's why Demon Hunter is so good with mana burn. So having a Staff of Silence on the timer, just adds to the strength of that.
So would you ever consider choosing Demon Hunter over Dark Ranger purely because of the fact that you can get a Staff of Silence here? For instance, in a more competitive four-way free-for-all where a lot was on the line, would you feel comfortable going for the Demon Hunter knowing that you'd be able to pick up the Staff of Silence, since Night Elf really does seem to rely on being able to silence later on?
Yeah, that's a good point. You know what? I think yes. I mean, for one, you can't count on getting one high-level item. I mean, you can throughout a longer game, but I mean, there very may well I wouldn't have got that dropped, and then maybe it wouldn't come for another 20 minutes in the market. If I was going all in on getting a Staff of Silence, I wouldn't get it. But in general, though, I would pick Demon Hunter on this map over Dark Ranger because of not only a Staff of Silence but other items as well. The fact that you can get Helm of Valors, which is a great item, +4 strength and +4 agility, is really good on the Demon Hunter. And just other items too. You're able to get big, beefy, strong heroes on this map. So I think it's better to have combat heroes that really can fight and utilize these great items, such as the Demon Hunter, rather than going Dark Ranger, where the Dark Ranger would be better on maps where you can't get very good items. For example, Deadlock is a great Dark Ranger map. Or Twilight, because it's a bigger map, there's lots of room, you can expand a lot, you can expect to have a lot of gold. Demon Hunter is generally better on these kind of smaller to medium-sized maps, and better on maps that have good items, and Dark Ranger is better on maps that have a lot of small, easy creeps, many expansions, or lack of strong items.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And just touching back upon gold management and buying items, you talked about that before. How do you balance out using your gold for an army versus using it for items? Anything in particular that you can give us tip-wise for, say you've got 500 gold, and it's early on in the game, do you go ahead and spring to buy that Amulet of Spell Shield, knowing that maybe it's going to cost you a little bit in order to get that gold back, but it'll be worth it because somebody else is not getting that item?
Yeah, generally I would prioritize getting items. Now, in the case that wouldn't be so, is if you have a really early threat, or if you feel like you're going to be engaging someone early on, you don't want to obviously spend all your gold on items and then have them have a better army than yours.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, I mean, if it's safe to buy an item and there's a good item, definitely grab the item, because yeah, you want to not only get it for yourself but deny other players from having it. And it just kind of goes along with the FFA theory of play. You want to continue to build up your heroes. You want to build up your base. You want to, continue to improve in that aspect. And then the other part of that is you see that I have a bunch of Moonwells now. It's the 14th minute, and I have I think 10 Moonwells right now. With Elf, it allows you to have some room for error with that. I mean, I can spend my gold on items, and even if I have an army that comes and attacks me that utilize their gold better than I did as far as units go, I have good heroes with good items, and then I have Moonwells to replenish those. So, yeah, it kind of allows you to not focus on an army with Elf, which is nice. Well, I'm getting kind of ganked right here.
I've noticed that, yeah. A little bit of a rough early game for you as everybody seems to be coming to try and take you down. And And let's talk about your Moonwell formation here. It seems like they are a little clustered together and would go down to AoE attacks pretty easily. What's your rationale for the way that you've built these? And we see a lot of players kind of cluster them around their Tree of Eternity. Do you dislike that strategy? And if so, why?
Well, it kind of depends. I build my Moonwells different on different maps and just even in different games. Obviously, if you cluster your Moonwells together, like you said, AOE attacks can be that much more effective. However, when I usually like in this game, I try to have a good center opening where I can kind of divide my base into two. I can have the back of my base and the front of my base. This way, if I TP or if I'm defending against anything, I have like room to breathe, but I also have a consistent line and kind of chunk of wells to heal my heroes. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not as concerned about AOE, especially the fact that I have a Staff of Silence and a Demon Hunter with Mana Burn. Um, so kind of in this area, it's important. Like some players will build their bases really tight and kind of more like when you're playing solo. And while that can deter single heroes and allow you to defend early on better, you want to have enough room. It's really important to have enough room for your army to move around and operate. But in this game, I kind of have that there. Now, as far as Moonwells being clumped together, being in lines, like I could have done it differently. Sometimes I like to kind of move them more around the edge on trees and kind of space them out a little bit more. Kind of depends on your preference. I do in a lot of games you'll see me put wells along the Tree of Eternity like a lot of elves do, like you pointed out too. The one disadvantage of that is that if you do, for example, undead late game, use Death and Decay on your main hall, they're also going to kill all your moon wells. I like to have a few there at least. That way, when I staff a hero and it's in red health, immediately it can be healed. Um, but again, it's just kind of preference. I think the most important thing is to give yourself enough space and room throughout your base to not be blocked when you're trying to run through or not be hampered. A quick note on HTRT, who plays human. He makes his when you look at his bases, like it's the thing that I always when I watch replays of good players, I always try to like see how they build their bases and compare mine to them. The thing about HTRT, he's really the first human. He builds his bases like wide open. He doesn't make a bunch of towers. They almost look like you're a bad player the way that he builds his bases. But the thing is that they're so very open, so he's really able to maneuver through, and he's not going to be hampered by too small of a space to run his heroes through when defending. And as I'm saying, I think that's the number one key when making a base with any race, but elf especially.
That's fair. Let's go back just a little bit. You grabbed the Keeper of the Grove as a third here. I mean, at this point, I think that's almost standard and everybody takes it for granted, but why don't you tell us a little bit about why you choose Keeper of the Grove third in this situation, not something along the lines of Alchemist, Priestess of the Moon, or even a Dark Ranger?
Sure. Yeah, again, that's just a personal preference. All of those heroes are definitely viable. I really love the Keeper of the Grove though. The Keeper of the Grove with Entangle allows Elf to have a disable. If you don't have Entangle, you don't have a disable. I mean, unless you have Silence, which I do, or Cyclone, which is more difficult to use. But Entangle, for one, stops channeling spells like Mass TP or Big Bad Voodoo, these kind of things. But Entangle just kind of goes with this aggressive play with the Demon Hunter and the Panda, and then the Keeper of the Grove third. You can really be really aggressive in battle, and you can take over battles. Mana burn one hero, haze fire the army. As they back up, you entangle one unit. Then the other thing is I like to play kind of a hit and run style a lot of times in with any race, and Keeper of the Grove really allows that. I'm gonna strike when I have the advantage, come in, entangle something, kill it, back up, let them chase me. They'll back up again. As you can kind of see now, entangle like really just helps me control the fight, and I really love Keeper of the Grove for that reason. Another thing about the Keeper is that late game Tranquility is really underrated. It has I think it's a 60-second cooldown. It
Yep.
feels even less than 60 seconds, and it basically full heals your entire army. Tranquility is such a great ultimate. You can use it in battle with the anti-magic potion, but really its best use is after fights. You just heal up. You don't have to use all your moon wells. It's really a great ultimate. Now, with that being said, the Priest of the Moon was really the standard. Back in the day, 5 or 6 years ago, everyone would go Priest of the Moon third. Obviously, you have the Owl Scout, which is so important, and the True Shot Aura for your chims. and Starfall, and I mean, don't get me wrong, the Priest of the Moon is really good. But I find that when I don't play with the Keeper of the Grove, I miss the Entangle so much, and it just kind of more suits my play style. As far as I like going Alchemist third. Sometimes I'll play a Demon Hunter Panda Alchemist. It's a fun combo. But without the Entangle and without the Owl Scout, I mean Alchemist is really good, but I think it's not quite as optimal as one of the other two. And then lastly, the Dark Ranger. I know, for example, like Ishan really likes to play Demon Hunter Panda and Dark Ranger third, and that's a really good combo, really good offensive combo also. And you can mana burn and silence just in itself. But especially in this time when I have a Staff of Silence already, and Keeper the Grove on smaller maps also is really effective. So just kind of some random points, but that's why I like Keeper third over the other ones.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I pretty much took it for granted that you'd be going Panda as your second hero, but let's talk a little bit about why it is that Panda is so important to Night Elf, and frankly, is it possible for Night Elf to play without the Panda?
You know, the thing about Night Elf is that they have a lot of trouble. There's one hard counter that every other race has to Night Elf. Undead being mass gargoyles, orc being bats, and human being tanks, obviously, and to a lesser extent gyros. Panda handles all of that. The Panda is the one hero. He has the best debuff in the game with Haze, and Haze Fire is so good. It changes the battle completely in any kind of air versus air battles. For example, versus gargoyles. Panda is your lone force versus tanks, to try to keep throwing volleys of Breath of Fire at the siege units. And then even versus bats. One well-timed Haze and Fire on a pack of bats will kill the bats. The Panda is just so efficient and so good. Now, you can play without Panda, and I've played without the Panda before. I mean, you can play the classic Reign of Chaos combo with Demon Hunter, Keeper of the Grove, and Priest of the Moon. You can play like Demon Hunter, Alchemist, Keeper of the Grove. There's a couple other combos without the Panda, and usually the Panda it's really always usually the best choice. However, in the one matchup that the Demon Hunter, Keeper of the Grove, and Priest of the Moon would be superior is an Elf Mirror. That's again with going lore units with Dryads and Bears and Mountain Giants. The Panda is not as effective, obviously, if you're not facing air units, and Dryads are magic immune. There is a big advantage one with Demon Hunter, Keeper of the Grove, and Priest of the Moon. Is once they get all above level 6, you're really a strong army. The fact that you can have Starfall and Tranquility on timers with a high level Demon Hunter, it's a really good combo. And specifically in that combo, you really want to build your Demon Hunter up. You want to have lots of, Helm of Valors and agility items. And if you can't get those to a lesser extent, at least have some Circlets and Nobility. You want to have your Demon Hunter be really strong and then have your 2 support heroes. But again, you can't really beat having a Panda outside of very rare circumstances.
That's fair. So I think that pretty much covers the hero talk. Let's talk a little bit about your macro game as Elf. We frequently hear the expression, you're either 50 or you're 100 as Elf, and what that means is you're either hoarding at 50 or you're going directly up to 100 because an 80 food army is somewhat useless to an Elf player. We've seen you disregard that completely, and you certainly have actually made Elf an aggressive race, which we don't see too much of. So how do you manage your gold and food? When do you do your supply jumps? And any other general macro tips you have for Elf, either in general or for this map in particular?
Sure. Well, first of all, credit to Blex, to New Blex, who really kind of started the B50 or 100 method of Elf, and he was famously always so good at hoarding with Elf, and at the best times he'd always scout and find the best times to go from 50 to 100 and really do a lot of damage. Take some damage and back down to 50, and he really played efficiently like that. Though how I play, I disagree with that because in a certain sense, because the 80 foot army with Elf can be really good. It just really requires you to have competitive, comparable hero levels. If you're behind, if you're behind a human, undead, or orc, really, if they have higher hero levels than you can't compete in an 80 foot army just because you'll get tore up so fast. But if you have strong heroes, another reason why I like the Demon Hunter, with this army that I have right now, I have 5/5/3 heroes, 80 food. I have a mix of hippos, some fairy dragons, some chims. This army in itself can fight any army right now, unless they have, level 7 or higher heroes. And being aggressive at 80 food can be effective as long as you have the hero levels.
That's fair. And I'm trying to think. I think we've pretty much covered everything we need to. So how about just some general tips and pointers for elf players on Silverpine? I mean, that's essentially what it's going to boil down to. Is we're trying to help out newer elf players or even older elf players who are looking to gain a competitive advantage on Silverpine. And what would you tell those players? What do you think helps make you better at Silverpine than some of our other players maybe?
Yeah, first of all, learn to build a strong base on this map. The trees are nice to where they kind of give you just an opening, and you can really have a nice, strong, secure base. Your first expansion is relatively exposed, but it's still kind of part of your main. So as long as you build your wells and your ancients right, you'll have a good base construction. And then learn to operate well on 50 food, because Silverpine, you want to be 50 as much as you can and gather these items. Try to get to these as quick as you can and try to get these creep spots, but just always check them. I mean, you can have wisps that check them, or you can just go back and forth with the heroes. What I like to do is, a lot of times before the level 8 items appear in the markets, they have sentry wards. So I'll pick up an early sentry ward and I'll drop one at each market and just consistently check for these items. This will give you a major advantage. I mean, if you pick up an amulet, a smell shield, or these items are just so good on this map. Other than that, these gold mines do have a lot of gold here, so don't spend so much resources defending all your expos. For example, if someone comes in and you're fighting someone and another player comes in and starts clearing out your expos, it's okay as elf to just let those die, as opposed to TPing and fighting, getting all your units batted, losing 30 food and having to recreate your army but saving your dead expo. The thing about elf is that their expos build so fast and they're so cheap. It's kind of a general tip, but let your expos fall. You can just send a wisp and remake it, and the effect is going to be minimal, but it's much better than losing your army. One more elf tip is that with the Panda, you buy anti-magic potions all the time. I can't stress this enough, and hardly any elves do this. The anti-magic potion is so important. It prevents sleep, mainly. It prevents silence. It prevents hex, stomp. It prevents them from shutting down your Panda. And what do you do when you're an opposing player fighting a good elf? You want to disable the Panda. That's your first priority in every battle, is to disable the Panda. So why would you let them do that? Buy an anti-magic potion. It's only 100 gold. You can buy 2 of them for the price of just over 1 hippogriff. Always buy them. And like I said, it'll make your Panda be most effective. You can even pop them, on your Keeper of the Grove, or any hero, your Demon Hunter. You want your heroes to operate fully, and it's one of Elf's major advantages, the anti-magic potion, and people don't utilize them enough. The last tip that I'll say is that try to get good at staffing. One thing that I feel like I've really kind of mastered, and I may have an advantage over any other elf, is that I have really good staffing, and I actually have a hotkey for it, which you can do with different programs. And I hotkey my staff to the letter G, and I have it in the same spot. And that way I'm so used to staffing everything. And really good staffing can make all the difference, especially when you're playing, fighting bats or just fighting any battle. Really, you save your units and you save your hero. You manage your economy well, and you'll always find yourself to have comparable gold counts, if not more, than other players, and they'll set yourself up for in position to win the game late.
Alright, well, this has been Creeping Patterns as Elf on Silverpine. Sexy, let's go ahead and get out of this game, and we'll continue on to our next one. If you are watching this on Twitch, stay tuned. We're going to do another Creeping Patterns right after this. If you are watching this on YouTube, then go ahead and let us know what you thought about it in the comments. Sexy is a fantastic caster, but this is actually only one of his first few times doing so. So all encouragement is highly welcome. And Sexy, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, and we'll catch you guys later.
It's such a travesty.